Hey everybody, it's been a minute, sorry about that, but there's been some other stuff going on here at the Red Barn. One is that the Lotus 7 replica is back, and this time it came in for an upgraded turbo and a new exhaust system. And that's getting wrapped up here in the next, I don't know, the next hour or so. So we shall get back onto the Ferrari swap 914. Still working on the wiring and a couple other things, but we're getting to it. Here we go. Okay, let's start with what's been going on inside the car with the ECU to bulkhead harness and other stuff that's in here. One is I have gotten a Radlock and Sherlock connectors. These are the quick disconnects for the battery power to the ECU. And then as I was doing all this, I realized that the power management unit, the PD16 that's going to live inside the car, it needs direct power. This is a smaller cable. These are 200 amp each. This is 120 amp capable for the PD16, which is going to live somewhere. I haven't decided exactly where that's going to go, but I need battery pass-throughs for all that stuff. So I located those here, and again, maybe hard to see, but you know, the firewall comes down like this, and then it kicks to a slightly different angle here, and these aren't bolted in. I'm still playing with this, but you can see, I think you can see, that slide angle kicks these things out at the bottom, and they very nicely tuck right down in here. And then, as you might recall from previous episodes, I had the bulkhead connectors for the wiring harness sitting right against the firewall. And it wasn't really a problem, but I didn't like the fact that they stuck out farther than they needed to. So what I did, you can barely see it, I took a piece of 1x2 095 wall rectangular tubing and chucked it onto the plasma table and cut out the mounting section for the bulkhead connectors, and then just sliced the front of the tube off, if you will, folded the sides in, and made a little box that I can now weld in here. And so, again, it's not welded in, it's just held in by magnets as I'm fitting things. But let me just sort of kind of put this together and show you how it's all going to look. All right, now I have not got the fasteners, the nut plates and everything on the hole on the backside. So these connectors are just set in there. But you can see, if you look back at the previous episodes, this was sitting out. This whole setup was sitting out by an inch because it's now recessed an inch into the firewall, but it's way more protected, And I like that a lot better. It's kind of cool. And so there is going to be my power and pass-through setup. And yeah, this looks like it sticks out a little bit, but the seat clears it just fine. It's got even more clearance now for the wiring harness. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'll make some kind of cover for this thing that can get upholstered, and it'll essentially just disappear. So that's this side of things. And then when you come around to the engine side, again, it's all just set in place, you know, not ready for prime time. There's the magnets holding it in there. But yeah, you get the idea now of where the wiring harness is going to start. And then there's all my power stuff that's going to sit essentially right below or right near the battery. So short runs from those posts up to power. And so that basically is the main updates for the inside of the car. Now let's go take a look at the engine harness stuff. Okay, sorry for some background noise. It's been raining like mad here at the Red Barn. So, engine harness. Here's what I've decided to do. I wanted to actually get a feel for physical layout and all that good stuff. So what I did is I just did some initial grouping of which wire goes where. And this is just a first rough cut fit. You know, yeah, that is screwed in, but that bracket's not welded in there, the bulkhead connector mount. And so this is actually going to be a tighter 90, and it's going to come up. And I think I'm going to take it up, kind of up in this area above the valve, the belt cover. But what you're seeing here is, here are injector and ignition wires for cylinders 1 through 4, and then the way this is numbered, it's cylinders 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that side goes 5, 6, 7, 8. And so again, I want to just work out the exact branch points and where exactly I want to route this thing. So I'm not abandoning the rope model, but I'm kind of moving in my own direction here. And so there's a couple of things to consider. One, you're seeing all the 25 amp wires come over here, and that's not really how it's going to be. So two of them, the little shorties that you can see right here, those will split, and one of them feeds, I'll have to splice into it because I need a 25 amp feed for the ignition and a 25 amp feed for the injectors on that side, and then it'll split over here and injectors and ignition on this side. And then these two, one runs down to the starter, and then one runs to the water pump, which is, it's down here somewhere, this connection. I'll replace that plug with a Deutsch plug. Anyway, so this is a little bit bigger a bundle than it'll be. Plus, none of the sensors are on there. This is just ignition, injection, starter, water pump power, and this side's O2 sensor. That's what this little bundle of shorty wires is. And that lives down, you can see it on that side right there. Header's missing on this side. But that is the first of the engine harness connectors done. Oh, and then here's something else. Here's something else I think I'm going to try. It's this. And what is this, you might say? Well, it is the injector. I don't know. It's all the injector connections from the factory 360 engine harness. And I just sliced it off to see if I might like this better. Because what's kind of cool about it is, and here you can see I put the manifold back on, and now you get an idea of one of the options for running the wires is to bring everything through here, and then come around the corner and feed the coils. And then if there were injectors, the 4 injectors per side right here, I'd have the connections coming for the coils, and then I'd have 4 connections coming into each of those. Might look a little busy, I don't know, but let me put you on the stand for a second and show you what this thing does. So this would need to have a connector, added onto it, right? The green in the case of the factory Ferrari wiring, that's just the power, and then those are the injector signal wires, so that's all good. But what's kind of cool is this. Imagine, if you will, this would run in here and then can get connected with that 8-position connector wire. And it's not obviously fitting right, but then this clips onto the injectors right here. And it's very same shapey look to this fuel rail. And I don't know the exact position, but you guys that know injectors know this is going to clip in, I don't know, maybe it's about like that. And then I'd simply have my my coil wires, which I could either bring all the way out here, or I could snake up underneath each time. So that's why I abandoned the rope model. I want to look at this thing in place and kind of get a vibe for what looks best. I think that rail, I think this is the way to go because it's very Sano. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So let me go work up the other connector plug, which is going to be very messy because it's all of the sensors, and then each of those sensor wires I've got to build and split sensor power and, well, sensor power for any of the pressure sensors, and then sensor ground, and then all the sensor wires for every one of the sensors, and get those routed and all that good stuff. So that one's going to take a little bit longer. And then, as you know, that little plug on the far outside there is just the CAN connection that's going to be free floating back here in case I ever need it, and it's just going to come back up. The rest of the wires run the tail lights, brake lights, turn signals, reverse lights, that kind of thing. So that doesn't even need to be worked on until the car is running and I need to drive it. So I may just forego that for a little bit. So yeah, back to the other big connector. Okay, second connector wire set is bundled and installed. Just rough fit, same deal. It's the bracketry is not welded in, so you can see it moves around, but this will end up being, I'll come up with some attachment point to the firewall for it here to keep it tucked in tighter, and then it's going to come up over the belt cover like planned. The first branch point will be here, and this just kind of gives you the idea. I'm glad I've done it this way versus the rope model. I don't know, it's just I've changed my mind about a couple positions, how I want to route stuff. But here is, for instance, this is going to be a branch point here, and I'm going to run the ignition and injection and the throttle body wires, which is what this bundle of 4 is. These will come up to the throttle body, and I've got this set up on both sides, so it's kind of symmetrical as much as I can. And then my shielded wires, this motor, the 360, had 4 knock sensors, And since this ECU only supports 2, which is, you know, generally, I'm going to say all you need, but what I've got here is I'm going to run one up to this side and run the knock sensor in the forward driver's side position, and then the other one's going to come back here and pick up the knock sensor location on the passenger rear side. Then I've got my crank position sensor that comes back to here. The actual sensor is missing, but it's going to terminate here. This is the O2 sensor for this side. And this is the cam position sensor. So, yeah, it works like that. And there's a couple of miscellaneous. This is my big long sensor ground wire that I need the length to reach the farthest sensor away from everything. I'll have a speed sensor. That's what this control wire is for, a signal wire, and it's going to pick up right off of these flats, the 6 flats on the output shaft. And if I come around here, what do we got? As I mentioned, same setup here. Oh, this is the cam position sensor, and remember, the Ferrari had 2 ECUs. Crank or a cam position sensor on each side, and here you can see there's the crank position sensor that is installed here, but I only need 1, right? This ECU only requires 1, so I'm going to run the crank position sensor on that side, the cam position sensor on that side. So this whole thing, as I mentioned earlier when I said this wire could run up into here, well, it won't even be here. I'll just cover that hole up and we'll be done. But here's the same deal over here. Here's the injection, ignition, and throttle body. And then all this stuff you saw before back here. The only thing now is I've got the sensor wires for, you know, things like the oil temp and things like that at the back. And then again, I'm just mocking up, kind of like trying to get this stuff to hang out of the way and give me an idea of where I want it to be. Remember, there's those pickup points inside the intake manifold where the wire loom will mount. And then this provides clearance for the water lines to get out, etc. I may run it behind. The fuel lines and tuck it up against the firewall. Here's a coolant temp sensor, signal wire, oil pressure sensor, signal wire. So it starts to give me an idea of where my branch points are, and then I can bundle this all together, pull it out, you know, after I trim everything to length, and then start to sheathe it, get it back in place, and then wire the connectors for each of the sensors. All right, let's talk about sheathing now. What I did here is I got the Raychem, what's upside down? The Raychem DR25 heat shrink sheathing. And this stuff is chemical resistant and abrasion resistant and is super cool and the motorsport way to go. So what I did was I got my my first branch point. These look like power wires. They are sized as power wires because I used the other 2 extra 25 amp capable pins here and just wired in spares. Now that's not spare power, it's just spare connection, because I can splice onto here down to whatever I need. But why not just take advantage and have a spare plug in case something comes up and I want to put, more goodies into the car, who knows? So rather than just leave those empty, I've got spares. But now what we're going to do is, in preparation for everything else, I'm going to finish this joint here, and I'm going to wrap these sections of the harness with the Kapton tape. And as you recall from an earlier episode, the Kapton tape is heat resistant and doesn't leave a residue, and it's super lightweight and it's super thin, doesn't leave much size. And that is in preparation for this is the 90-degree heat shrink boot. And if I put you on the stand, what you can see here is, now this is not recovered down, this is just slid on here. So when this gets shrunk, it'll tighten way up and look super neat and all that good stuff. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tape this joint in place with the Kapton tape. And then as you can see, this thing will actually shrink down and go to 90 degrees. This lip right here will, once this is all done, this will get put on here like this. And then when this gets shrunk down, and I'll slide this back down in here, but when this gets shrunk down, it'll completely make a rigid seal around this section of the harness, and completely seal it, be rigid and all that good stuff. But it's also got adhesive inside it. So the Kapton tape that we're going to put on here not only provides a little bit more strain relief, but it also protects the wires should there be a requirement to slice this back open. Giant pain to do it, but it means that the goo from this stuff won't get into the wiring. So you've completely protected the wires ahead of recovering this boot down onto it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, and here you can see I've got the Kapton tape taking care of those joins in preparation for the 90-degree boot. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to shrink anything down in here, heat shrink any of this, but I am going to heat shrink this section down so that I can close up this joint and just sort of lock this stuff in position here. All right, well, I figured I might as well just go ahead and follow up the heat shrink all the way down. And so now, I also use the rigid liner, the rigid, you can see the adhesive, but this is the rigid adhesive. It's called SCL, and that is completely sealed this joint. It's got the little spares harness popping out the backside, so that's all sealed up. And you can now see how this is gonna really look. This will be attached to the firewall like that. And in all that big mess of wires that looks like that when you're working with it disappears down into something that's quite tidy. So this is turning out nice. I think I'm going to go ahead and get that thing welded in because you can see it's a big pain. But that's going to wait till next time. So I'm going to call it for this episode. And thank you guys for watching. Appreciate your patience with me while I'm getting things back in order and getting back on the 914 Ferrari. So as always, like, share, subscribe, comment. And again, thanks for watching. Everybody take care. We'll talk to y'all again real soon. Bye-bye.